So, it'd be great just to have a little bit of an introduction, a bit about yourself and a bit of background.
Okay.
Who you are, please.
My name's Andrew Thompson. I work within the finance industry and have done for quite a few years. I suffer with a condition called Best's disease, or vitiliform macular dystrophy, which falls under the category of macular degeneration, and within that, which has wet and dry form, it's what we refer to as the dry form. As it's a dystrophy, that means it's hereditary, so my father also had it, and unfortunately I've also passed it on to my daughter. But it's therefore it can sort of impact at sort of quite an early age, and it sort of first was picked up when I was about 9 or 10. So in one respect, when you compare that to people who suffer with AMD, which is age-related macular degeneration, there are positives in the fact that at such a young age, you adapt and find ways around dealing with it. So that's basically how I've sort of dealt with it. Up to the last 2 or 3 years, it hasn't had a huge impact on me. I have been driving sort of for 34 years, but I've had to stop that now because I can't see the number plate. So, you know, that's I can see the number plate, I just can't read it, which is obviously the main focus. So it's literally up to the last few years really that there's been a more of a dramatic impact. So prior to that, sort of school was a bit awkward because it really impacted me when I was sort of doing O-levels, so, as they were then. And so the school at that time, you know, you didn't have, I'm talking sort of the 80s, they sort of didn't have the same level of SEN details that they have these days. So whereas now there are a lot of sort of assistance programs that can be given to people who've got eye disorders, there wasn't the same degree, and the people that I was seeing at Moorfields at that time, to his credit, Professor J said that the way the world is going, everyone will be using computers, so learning to touch type would be a good idea, which I did, and he was right. It is a very useful sort of skill to have, and also sort of within that, with the school, I couldn't read the blackboard, either up close or far away, because up close there was too much of a shine on it, and obviously far away it was too distant. So I had a pair of opera glasses, which caused great amusement with class buddies, and to read a book, a magnifying glass. So fairly basic visual aids, but they seem to sort of do the trick. Oh, and also enlarged print exam papers, so it sort of got me through.
In terms of the
there a second, well, I just heard the clock.
Yeah, I can hear that in the background.
All of that was perfect, but all you can hear is this, like in the background. So I'm going to do the polite thing and get rid of it. Yeah, carry on where you were. That was great.
Yeah, that was good. Just in terms of the actual physicality of the condition, so what happens and how does it come about?
Well, basically, it's the macula, which is the sort of the bit that everyone needs to see sort of pinpoint vision. That has a huge number of sort of cells within it. I think it's something like 12,000 cells or something within a sort of 5 millimetre sort of area. And the macula basically has a sort of a build-up of fluid between all the layers, between the back of the eye, and that pushes it all out of sync. I'm talking real layman's terms. Obviously, I'm not an optician or a specialist in this area, but my understanding is that the build-up of fluid pushes everything out of order, and in some instances, the actual fluid or the blood will actually seep through into the eye. Now that will then become the wet form of macular degeneration. In my case, it doesn't seep through, but it just distorts everything. So what happens is there are areas there which do get damaged in the scar tissue, and that prevents getting pinpoint vision. So my central vision is not good. So say for example, if I'm looking at you, your face is just a blur, and sort of, if we had a staring competition, I would win. But all around you is perfect, because the vision, the surrounding area, which, believe it or not, the surrounding area has the same number of cells. So you've got a much bigger area, but with it's not as sort of pinpoint. But I use the peripheral vision to sort of get around, and you see it. I'm not sure what other people with macular degeneration actually see, because obviously we all see things differently. But in my case, you see it on the news where it's described as a big black blob in the central vision. In actual fact, it's not like that. It sort of takes on the colour, if you like, of the surroundings. So you don't see it as a big black blob. You just see it as very, very out of focus, almost as if you've put sort of Vaseline on your glasses and sort of trying to look through a blob of Vaseline, whereas everything else surrounding it is perfectly clear. So, for example, if I was looking at a tree, you'd just see it as a green tree, and so long as you weren't looking at the detail and you glanced at it, it would just look normal. So, that's how you sort of get by with it. It sort of manifests itself in different ways, but that's effectively what I see.
And how prevalent is it in terms of the population?
Age-related macular degeneration is extremely prevalent, and I believe it's the biggest form of blindness, or a form of blindness, because they do say you can't go blind with it, but if you're actually suffering, it's as good as. It's someone pointed out the other day that if you're in this sort of condition a few years ago, you've had a white stick. So it's sort of, these days we have moved on, the development in research and everything has moved on tremendously, so that there isn't a cure, but there's something that might stabilise it. Unfortunately, in my instance, with the Best disease, it's not as common. The conditions that you face are very similar and comparable with people who are suffering AMD, but my understanding is that Best disease isn't as common, and therefore the same level of research isn't being done in it. But having said that, as it's in the same area, and there are similarities with macular degeneration, you probably find that if a cure is found for one, hopefully it'll come back on the other one as well. So.
And what sort of, on a sort of day-to-day basis, practically, what sort of challenges do you face because of the condition?
Obviously, a couple of years ago, I went into the optician, drove down to the opticians, sort of went through the normal tests, at the end of which they said, "Are you still driving?" I said, "Yep." And they said, "We don't think you should be." So I took it upon myself to take myself off the road. So that was June, July 2015. And so basically just cycle. So that's the first thing that because when you've got some sort of disability, it's the fact that you're losing your independence. That's what concerns many people. And so whatever you can do to sort of maintain that level of independence obviously keeps you positive. So the day after we've got 2 young children, so that would put more onus on my wife having to do the school run. So I went straight out and bought a tag along. So I was able to at least help with running one of the children to school. At that time they were going to different schools. That helped. But so that's the first challenge. But again, there's positives with that. I get to work 20 minutes, rain, shine, wind, whatever. It's all traffic. It's just going to take me 20 minutes. I feel I'm a lot healthier than I was. So, well, bodily wise, not eyes wise, obviously. So that's one of the positives. Within work have been brilliant. They've provided me with a dual screen, so within that I can then sort of do the work that I have done all my life. There are loads of applications now that assist people. Within work are paid for a specialist application that actually reads the text on a computer. But having said that, there is actually also a sort of the similar type of application already within many computers that people are just unaware of. I'm talking about a PC rather than a Mac at the moment because that's what I use. But if you use the Windows key and the letter U, it brings up a whole load of applications which will read the text, magnify the screen, and so you've got all these sort of things these days that will assist you with these sort of problems. So what I tend to do at work, one of the screens has it standard size, and on the other one I use it with the magnification. I do have to do that because when I have to explain things on the computer to my colleagues, if they look at the magnification one, they start feeling seasick. So they're better to sort of focus on the more stable screen. But again, it's sort of finding ways and means to sort of get around things, and thankfully that assists me, and I can sort of still do the job that I've been doing. Mind you, I've been doing it for 30 years, so I've got a vague idea.
And are there any other things that come to mind in terms of pre the condition to what you now have to cope with?
Well, pre-conditions going back a long while, but I mean, obviously, probably the best way is to talk about the condition prior to the last couple of years. And in fairness, in truth, I tried to get by and sort of do things as normal and without any sort of indication that there was any sort of problem. But I think that's when it suddenly does become an issue. That's when you suddenly think, oh, hang about, this is awkward, and you start actually feeling sort of a bit concerned about how firstly you're coming across to people, and when people suddenly realise there's an issue, there's a potential level of embarrassment that they have. So, really it's sort of just trying to sort of alert people to it so that they don't feel embarrassed. And, it's something that we deal with, we cope with, and if there's a level of understanding, it's not sort of trying to put people off. I mean, one of the big issue that I've had for a long while is actually facial recognition. As I mentioned earlier, sitting here, we're 2 meters away from each other, and if I look directly at you, I just lose all your facial features. And so when you're walking in the street, the number of people I've walked past, and of course they just assume you've blanked them, and you're not doing it to be rude. And the number of times I've done that to my wife is, but she keeps changing her hairstyle, so it's like those, the aircraft recognition things, the silhouettes of the aircraft recognition. You recognise people by their hairstyle sometimes, and if they change it, you've had no hope.
And do you tend to tell people, or is it something that might just come up naturally?
I think these days I tell people more, basically because people will hand me something to read, and I say, oh, sorry, I can't see that. Just a second, and I'll take my phone out, photograph it, enlarge it, and then I can read it. So, there's ways and means of sort of getting round, and I think from my perspective, it's just having the front to sort of say, look, I've got a problem, don't worry about it. I can get by doing this sort of thing, and of course. If you look at things within just general shopping, for example, there are, sometimes there's the print on some of the smaller products. There are some that are the style of the labelling is sort of a handwriting, and I've got no hope with that. But if I photograph it, enlarge it, then I can read it. That might look quite odd to people in the supermarket, but hey ho, just sort of it's how you deal with it.
And on that one, is there any other sort of niggles that you find that you come up against that you think, God, if only that was done differently?
Yeah, I wish number plates were massive. I could probably get the 25 yards or whatever the distance is, but no. I think this is one of the things that you do. I probably started noticing a few years ago. You're looking at instructions and things that you get from various stuff, and you think, are these getting smaller? Are they, is this? Why are they printing it so small? And it probably has been that size all the time. It's just that It's the deterioration of the eyesight is makes it worse. But I'm sure there are lots and lots of people in the same situation. If, for example, if you've got someone who's short-sighted, you take their glasses off, they're in the same boat really. So, in theory, there's a lot of people with a level of disability when you actually sort of think about it.
A little bit of an introduction about yourself would be great. Awesome.
Okay, I'm Bill Gardner. I'm 72. 14 years ago, I was diagnosed as having dry macular disease in one of my eyes. There are two kinds of macular disease. One is dry and one is wet. Dry macular means that the point at the back of your eye where all the light is focused that you take in is a tiny pinprick of light. And the point that hits the back of your eye wears out, many specialists say, wears out rather like a carpet does. And so all of the receptors that normally turn that into normal vision become dulled. And macular degeneration, as I understood it then, meant that it was a very slowly progressing disease. It affects people mostly in the age of over 55. It then progresses very slowly, and you can be lucky, if there's such a thing, you can be lucky and get all the way to death without having your vision seriously affected. You can be unlucky and have it affected in a few years and then get progressively worse. That's what I had in 14 years ago. And there was no effect, particularly on my life, because my vision was very good. I was just in the early stages. And then 2 years ago, in a routine examination, I was told that my right eye had gone wet. And that's for many patients what the dry form progresses to be wet, and that's in many ways much worse. Firstly, it progresses much faster. It produces a macular spot, it's called, in the center of your vision, which means you can't recognize things that you're looking straight at, but your peripheral vision can remain relatively unaffected. But the wet macula is caused by blood leaking into the back of the eye from the blood vessels in the eye. And what I didn't know then, and we only found out from a lecture at the Macular Society a few months ago, blood inside a blood vessel or an artery is in its perfectly normal place and is good for the body. Once a blood vessel bursts and that blood is allowed to leak into places where it doesn't live, it becomes caustic, and it produces scar tissue in the back of the eye. Therefore, if you have wet macula and the back of the eye bleeds, which they all do, the effect on that is that you have very seriously blurred vision in a central spot. Excuse me. And in the years gone by, as for the dry form, in years gone by, there was no treatment for that. We're much more fortunate now. There are now injections which you can have put into the eye every month, and they drive away the blood that has leaked, and they drive it away for a period of time of usually a month, but it can be longer. And with a bit of luck, that stops the scarring happening, and it protects your eyesight from being blurred. So we're in a much better time, and indeed recently the eye specialist said to me, your vision is very good, and it is. Your vision is very good. We're not going to inject this month, but just so you understand how much progress we've made, if we were sitting here 20 years ago in exactly the same situation, you would now have a white stick, because we wouldn't have had the injections that enable you to keep your eyesight. And it's that bleeding that causes you to lose it. So we've moved a long way, and I'm lucky because my vision is extremely good and may remain so for years. I have no way of knowing. And that's, I guess, psychologically part of the problem of having a macular degeneration disease. You're fine today, you have no idea when or if it'll get worse, slowly or quickly.
And on that particular point, you know, what sort of emotions does it stir in terms of like your eyesight and the fear? I guess is, you know, does it stir up anything that you think in the future? What if?
Okay.
You know, what does that feel like? Living
I can answer that from two angles. The first angle is from a personal angle, and I have no experience of having to live with severely affected eyesight. But what I have got, having got the disease, is we created a group called Guernsey Macula Society for all of those people who've got the condition to come and mix with other people who've got the same condition and learn how to deal with it. So I've listened to lots of them talking about things they have to deal with, things they struggle with, things that affect their psyche and get them depressed, things that frighten them. And we've, in that group, which meets once a month, we've tried to find ways of having visiting speakers come in to talk about motivational stuff, attitudes, blind people coming in to talk about ways in which they cope. And the evidence is there, after running this for 2 years, the evidence is there that if you keep a positive note going through everything, some of those people, or all of them, can start to feel better and can start to feel more ambitious about what they might or might not try to achieve.
Yeah. So kind of on a day-to-day basis, what are some of the things you face? What are some of the challenges that affect?
For the patients, the ones they talk about are in the supermarket. One of the things you have to remember about macular disease is that appearances can be deceptive. So you can see a person walking through the supermarket and you would never know that they can't see very well because they've got peripheral vision, so they can see to walk down the aisleways and they can see at a distance some of the product ranges they want, well, be it cereals or baked beans, but up close they struggle. And they have to get up close to read the stuff on the packet that they want to read. And there's the dilemma. So you can appear to be quite normal, but not be quite normal. And the giveaway, of course, is when you see in a supermarket, you see somebody with their nose 2 inches from a tin of baked beans, desperately trying to find an area of their eye which can read the small print that they're looking for. And when you see, and there are lots of examples like that. If they want to read the newspaper, for example, they can either say, well, I can't read the newspaper anymore, or they can say, I can't read the newspaper in the way I used to read the newspaper, so I need a device, a something, be it electronic or mechanical, a magnifying glass, a computer screen, something that blows that print up and allows me to read it. And there are a million examples like that from every day. Needlework for women, hobby work for men, books, watching television. How do you watch television if you've got to sit a long way away from it in order to get it in your peripheral vision, but that's too far away to see the detail? Increasingly, there are lots of devices and aids which people can use in order to make that better. Sometimes the barrier is that because they're elderly, they've kind of given up a little before they start. So and technology doesn't come naturally to the elderly, so they've got to learn new tricks. But having said that, they've got to learn new tricks. But if they listen to other people who've been down the same road, they can learn that new trick a lot quicker than if they had to find it out for themselves. And technology is the pick instance. If you gave one of these patients an iPhone and showed them 20 wonderful things the iPhone can do, they'll never have any chance of accessing any of those apps because that doesn't come naturally. If somebody who's already compromised with their vision or even blind says to them, here's how I do it, and shows them in easy stages, then there was a lovely example. We had a blind guy giving a lecture a few months ago, and he was an accomplished speaker but completely blind, and his wife led him to the lectern. He placed his iPad on the lectern, and the audience were all wondering why he had an iPad if he's blind. And he then explained that as he went through his lecture, they would hear his voice and they'd also hear a nice lady's voice. and the nice lady's voice would tell him what was on the next slide. So he explained how he was going to how he dealt with his blindness and became a public speaker. And then he said, and the only thing I want you all to do is, I have delivered many of these lectures facing the other way from the screen. I'd like you to tell me where the screen is, and then I can get started. So he introduced a bit of humour, just to show that he wasn't immune from any of the problems that everybody else had. And just in seeing that, you could see some people saying, well, if he can do it, I can. And I don't need to give public speaking. So those are some of the things that are everyday things that are really difficult are restaurants. You'll probably have noticed in the last 20 years, or I've noticed, in the last 20 years, the writing on the menus gets smaller and the light gets less. So they dim the light, and you're trying to read a menu in dim light. Now, the one thing that a macular person needs absolutely is the best light possible to have even a chance. And you'll see in restaurants these days, you'll see people with their iPhone set onto the spotlight, and they read the menu by running their iPhone over the menu card. And it'd be nice if places began to become aware that not just macular people, but a lot of elderly people have slightly compromised eyesight, and dimming the lights and printing the menu with blue on white, pale blue on white paper, is only going to be visible to people with wonderful eyesight. So those are some of the everyday things that can be frustrating, but are relatively easy to put right.
And do you find when when people find out or know about the condition that you have, what do you find there's any reactions you get? Different reactions, strange reactions?
I think it's very difficult for anybody to understand the impact that any disease has on somebody that has it. If you don't have diabetes, how would you know how a diabetic is affected by everyday life? If you don't have cancer, how do you know how a cancer patient feels who is in remission but doesn't know when or if the disease will come back? I think people simply can't identify what it is that affects somebody that has an eye condition, particularly if it's a progressive eye condition like we have. And the way you can achieve that is by more publicity concerning the conditions, such as you're doing now, just to bring it more to the attention of Joe Public, so they can begin to recognise that the person with their nose an inch from the baked beans tin might have the need of some help. And wouldn't it be nice if you saw that in the supermarket and somebody went across and said, if you're struggling, can I give you a hand for 5 minutes? We'll walk around and do some of the shopping.
Yeah. And if you rewind, have you got any stories where maybe things have happened, anything humorous that you can think of when maybe to do with people's reactions or?
I don't have any specific humorous examples, but the example that I like best is the first meeting of the Guernsey Macula Society was held 2 years ago, and there were maybe 30 people in the room, and we ran for about 45 minutes chatting about this and that, and then we had a break for a cup of tea, and I went off to the loo, and from the loo it was just next door to the room, and there was absolute silence in the room for the break. Nobody knew anybody. They were all frightened. They were all worried. And about a year ago, we were in exactly the same situation, and we had exactly the same setup, and we paused for a break, and I went off, and I stood, and the noise coming out of the room was like a football match. And that's how the atmosphere had changed among people who were scared, worried, frightened, And they just gained a level of confidence, and they knew each other. They had somebody else to talk to, and it was your good question of how do other people respond to this problem. Once you talk to somebody who has got the same problem as you have, but is maybe coping with it a little bit better, your confidence goes up a little. And then when you listen to somebody else, and there's a lovely story. We had a blind guy over from the UK as the main speaker at one of these meetings, and I picked him up at the airport, took him to, he had a white stick, not a dog, took him to St. Pierre Park, and I said to him, you'll have to forgive me, I don't know how to lead a blind person. And he said, it's absolutely no problem, I've been blind for years. You just walk ahead of me and keep talking. And we got to get the doors of the St. Pierre Park, and I said to him, what help do you need going into the hotel? He said, I go into hotels every week in my life. I'll show you. Just tell me, where's reception? And I said, when you go through the doors, it's to your right about 20 yards. And he said, that's fine. So he walked through the doors. And as he walked through the doors, he turned to his right and he said, completely blind, and he said, hello there, how are you? And the girl behind the desk said, I'm fine, how are you? And he zeroed straight in on her, went to the desk, did his signing in stuff. Then there was a nervous pause because she wanted him to sign the register. And he said, I know exactly what your problem is now. You want me to sign on a bit of paper I can't see. He said, this is the highlight of my day. You put your hand with your finger pointing at where you want me to write, and I'm going to get hold of your hand for a little while, and I'm going to sign, which I thought was a lovely way of dealing with a potentially embarrassing situation. And then she said to him, you're in room 321. He said, what floor is that on? And she said, it's on the 3rd floor. And he said, that's absolutely fine, I'm off. And he turned around and walked straight to the lift. And when he came back down, I said to him, how did you know where the lift was? And he said, because your other senses are heightened, if you allow them to be. So all the time I was standing at the desk talking to the girl, I was hearing the ping from the lift. So I knew exactly where it was, and I had a pretty good idea what the distance was. So I think those, when somebody who is severely sight compromised tells stories about how they cope, the rub-off effect can be impressive on other people. Why would we worry about the fact that we can't read the newspaper the way we used to when he's travelling the country giving lectures? Surely there's something we can do.
That's good. It sounds like the group is a useful, it's a good, useful community, and it has its, the benefits from that. So, just trying to think if there's any other points. How are we doing on time, Ollie?
Yeah, fine. We've got about 5 minutes, I think, on this one, and then if there's anything that we want to recover with both of you. Have we thought of tips? I don't think we've covered tips for the public other than the supermarket. Is there anything else that the public could do to ease the...
Yeah, any barriers and the suggested changes, I guess.
I got the point about sort of if people walk past you, you're not blanking them. So just to be aware of it. It's not done deliberately.
Yeah.
So just really being aware of that that type of aspect.
It's difficult because the people concerned don't want to let on that they can't see very well. So they will do anything, generally, they'll do anything to appear normal. So it's very difficult for the public to spot it. But the signs are there sometimes. But blind people and sight-compromised people can be very defensive. But I think if any member of the public is aware that if they offer help, like can I read these things on the supermarket, that the blind person or the sight-compromised person, if they react a bit defensively or aggressively to say, no, I'm fine, not to take that as an insult, but just to accept that those people are hurting, and that's why they're responding like that. And that's no reason why they shouldn't try it again next time they see somebody who might need a little bit of help.
And we talked about the ages that it affects, from, how do you kind of see that?
The statistics are approximately 1 in 5 people over 60 will have macular degeneration. That goes down to 1 in 3 people over 80. So in the population of Guernsey, you'll have perhaps 1,000 people who are suffering from the condition. And as we get an aging population, that is going to increase, not decrease.
Wow. Yeah, it's quite something actually. And it can affect young people as well as old.
Well, yeah, my daughter's 6 and she's got it, but again, trying to sort of focus on a positive, if you like, is the fact when you're young, you do adapt and sort of find ways around. But the thing that I've always done, probably sort of subconsciously really, is something that they refer to as eccentric reading, whereby you don't actually look directly at it, you look above or below or either side, and you sort of read along those sort of lines. But as I say, when it sort of impacts someone at a young age, you sort of naturally find ways and means of coping. You know, your eyes are younger; they're more, they're sort of more malleable, if you like. The lens isn't as hard as it is when you get older. But the thing with age-related macular degeneration, it can literally happen overnight. You know, you go to bed in perfect vision, and you can wake up and you've got this central vision loss. And you know, that's for someone who literally happens to them overnight, that's going to be a huge impact on their lives. As we've spoken about with the group, I think that when the group was first started up, you had a lot of people who were in this situation. You know, there's nothing that can actually be done to correct the vision, and so you've got a lot of people very concerned, very upset, finding it difficult to cope. But sharing those sort of situations and experiences, and meeting people who, as Bill said, have coped tremendously well with complete sight loss. It's inspiring to see some of these guys. It really is, and I think that has rubbed off. And you do start thinking to yourself, not really got a lot to worry about. So, you know, from our perspective, whereby we've got a condition that has an impact and causes frustration, you know, we sort of meet people who have sort of been inspirational to us. So we think, well, we haven't really got anything to moan about. And so it's just really for the general public to be aware that these sort of conditions do exist, and you're not going to be able to sort of identify them very easily. And one of the things I used to do when I was younger, well, I'm a trained or qualified diving instructor. Now, most of my diving has been done within the UK. There's sort of 25 years diving in the UK. And that's great, because the visibility in the UK, everyone's on the same boat. So, you know, you know, sometimes you get spectacular visibility, and that's astounding. But, you know, diving within those sort of conditions was just fine for me. And so, you know, it hasn't stopped me from having some sort of tremendous experiences. And I think that's the sort of the message that we put across to people who have got the condition. You know, that life doesn't stop, but for other people who thankfully don't have to cope with it, just be aware that there are people. I mean, for me, I now cycle everywhere, unless my wife drives me on occasions, and so from that aspect, as a cyclist. Not a blind cyclist, obviously. I'm actually got reasonable vision to allow me to cycle, so I'm not a danger to anybody or myself. You know, it sort of comes down to road awareness and sort of having, so you can extrapolate it in many different walks of life about general awareness and consideration. And you know, there's people sort of getting on with their lives and getting by, and just being aware really is the sort of message that needs to be taken on board.
Can I add something on every day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you want to move that?
Do it
The
on.
mic back. Because we lost there was a good bit at the beginning about you and your daughter, which the mic obviously wasn't pointing at the
Oh,
right
right.
thing. So if we can, we'll just finish with your one. If we get that short clip about your daughter and how she's developing techniques earlier,
Yeah.
then I think, we'll be done. Because we are pushing close to 1:30. But yeah, that's fine. Carry on with your.
Okay.
It was just raising some examples of helpful things that can be done. The Macular Society in the UK has developed a whole range of gadgets to solve little everyday problems. And 2 of our members from Guernsey went across to a training course they had in August to train up to demonstrate these gadgets. And their plan is not only to come to the Macula Society to show people how these gadgets can be used and how they help their life, but also they want to go to care homes and to any place, Guernsey Voluntary Society, anywhere where elderly people collect, to give them a talk and a demonstration. And for example, one of the gadgets, not to go right through them, but if I use one simple one and one technological one, the simple one is if a person with poor, very, very poor vision wants to pour themselves a cup of tea, how do they know when they've reached the top of the cup? You can't stick your finger in because it's tea. And so they have a simple device for that you clip over the edge of the cup. And when the liquid reaches the bottom of this thing, it beeps. Now that's simple but clever, but most old people don't know about it. And you've got similar progress in the technological world. In iPhones, there are 1 million things that the iPhone will now do, or an iPad, to help people work, from expanding text. And then you look at people who want to do close work, who need a very good light. And if you need 2 hands to do your close work, then you haven't got another hand to hold the light and keep moving it around where you need it to be. So there are large magnifying glasses which have a built-in light source, so they can actually work beneath the magnifying glass with their fingers and look from the other side and see the whole thing expanded and in perfect light conditions, so they've got 2 hands to work. All of those kind of things make things possible. Now they can read the newspaper, now they can read a book, now they can read a magazine. And it's that kind of thing of getting the public to be more aware, because if people of your age, for example, know these things exist, and somewhere in your family you have somebody who has very poor eyesight, then you can tell them it exists, and you can tell them where to go and find it. So that's the next stage of the message that we want to try and take out there.
Okay.
I'm technical, I can do that.
That's good. Well, I can imagine all the ads and stuff.
Unbelievable.
Whereas
Brilliant.
when I first got my smartphone and was sort of sitting there looking at it, I'm thinking, I still can't read it. I still, all the little icons at the top, when it's online or anything like that. And I thought, this is just crazy. I just still can't do it. It's a waste of money. And then we sort of looked through one of the the details within it, and there's a section within it to allow you to zoom. So you sort of work out that, and you can change the size of it, and of course you can just see everything on it. It's just tremendous. So, and then you've got something like, is it Siri? Where you just speak to it and it just texts. It's just tremendous the stuff that's available. So.
The spotlight on any kind of modern smartphone, the spotlight function, for example, everywhere that if you're in the street and you're looking in a shop window and the lighting isn't quite good enough, you can switch your spotlight on your smartphone and use it like a torch. The magnifying glass in an iPhone, I should call it a smartphone, the magnifying glass in a smartphone can allow you to read the menu because you can blow the text up. And those are 2 maybe of 100 ways in which it can be used. If only people could get over the fear barrier and want to use it.
Well, I had one instance when my daughter had just she just learnt to ride a bike. Literally a couple of days previously she was on the bike and she just scooted off. And I thought, where's she gone? We were in Summeray Park and she just went. I thought, where is she? And of course I'd lost the focus over a distance. I couldn't see the great detail. So I just got my phone out, took a photograph randomly enlarged it. I thought, oh, there she is. so I was obviously to chase her down and get her back.
Yeah, I know. That's a good one. Yeah.
But it just shows you that the technology that's just off your phone, and it just quick, easy, and okay, it might look a bit odd in some cases, but that's how people get by. So
I wish my iPhone would tell me where my golf ball's gone.
That would be a great invention. And cut. I'm going to quote that one. That's really good.
that's not the strap line. It was the thing I was talking about my daughter that had the.
Yeah, so how she's adapted in the eyesight.
Yeah.
If you want to just start again.
I'm just trying to think where I'd sort of started it from. It was.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think how. Was I describing the?
It was the when you're younger.
When you're young.
More sort of malleability.
Yeah. I mean, one of the big issues that you've got is the fact that when, if it occurs in younger life, like it did with me and my daughter, you adapt. You've got more. The eye is more malleable, and you can sort of find ways and means to get by. And a lot of these are sort of subconscious. So there's something that people actually who have AMD in later life, because when it happens in later life, as I say, it can be literally overnight. Go to bed, perfect vision, wake up, and your vision is gone, or your central vision is gone. And something like that happening in later life when you've had good vision all your life, it's going to be absolutely life-changing and a complete shock. Whereas if it happens in earlier life, like it did with myself, and unfortunately my daughter will have it. She hasn't got it into any severe degree at the present time, but it's good that it's been picked up at this age. But you can adapt, it's subconscious. We use something called eccentric reading, which is whereby you don't look directly at something, you're looking above or below. And so you just get by. I mean, one of the big problems that you have, because it's sort of a problem with central vision, is when people generally read, you're actually looking at the first two and the last two letters of a word. So when you scan reading, there was one thing that I used to be able to read it, probably only 10, 12 years ago. It was sort of something that was sent over the internet whereby it was a whole page and everything was misspelt except for the first and last two letters of each word, and you could actually read it. The problem is when your eyes get bad with macular degeneration, because you lose that, you have to almost spell the word bit by bit. You can't speed read because you just get sort of lost, unless like when I said at work that I can enlarge the font size and the screen size. So when I do the reading, I can actually put this thing up, make it enlarge, and I can sort of scan read to a certain degree. I'm obviously not as quick as anyone's got good vision, but I can read a lot quicker than I can do if I don't have that facility. But that just sort of goes to show that if you can have such a condition when you're young, you've got a long. I don't know what it's like to have perfect vision. I really hope they do find a cure, because if they do, it'll be tremendous. But it's what I've lived with and what I've got by with, and to me, I've always had reasonable enough vision. For 34 years I was driving. The irritation for me now is I can see the really bad driving, and I can still see to a reasonable level that it's not going to sort of affect every aspect of life. There are things that I can't do anymore, but I'll try and give anything a go, and get by.
Fantastic. It's a wrap. That's great.
Because since my daughter's been born, they've actually been able to do blood tests that's identified the dodgy gene. So if she, when she's older and she wants to have children, then they can probably eradicate or remove that gene. So that's a sort of a positive. But mean, there's other aspects, things that since I've contracted it, or sort of been more aware of it and sort of talking to other people with it, there isn't a cure, but the alarming part for people is the fact it could happen to anybody. Like Bill said, over the age, it can happen to anyone over the age of 55. There's no hard and fast rule as to why it happens. They don't know why it happens. But there are ways and means of improving your lifestyle to hopefully not allow it to happen. And the thing I've learnt lately is that kale is an absolute superfood, and the vitamins and everything that's within it, it's just off the scale by comparison with any other sort of food. And then of course you've got smoking, that potentially is a cause. Heavy drinking. It's lifestyle choices. You can, if you sort of take care of yourself and eat the right foods and all the rest of it, then hopefully you sort of reduce the risks. But it's like anything,
Slow it down.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Great.